This time on Poll Hub, we're checking in on the Senate. Until a month ago, few political analysts gave Democrats much of a chance of retaking control of the Senate, but now, well, things have changed. Or have they? We're going to look at the very few polls out there and talk about how what you see right now may have little to do with what we get on Election Day. Plus, can you imagine graduating college into this? Well, we can because we have a lot of seniors we've been working with for years, and we'll be talking with one of them and find out how he's dealing with it all. Masks on, remote location set. Let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
And our executive producer, Mary Griffith, will be joining us in a little bit for another segment. We're talking about the Senate. We haven't spent, in a normal election year, we would have talked about the Senate, on 5 podcasts by now. We haven't talked about it yet. And it's beginning to bubble up the way that political analysts are talking about it for a couple of reasons. One is that as we become more and more partisan, Senate races begin to look more like presidential races, and there's fewer and fewer differences between a state's presidential vote and a Senate vote. But also, it's the notion that Democrats, who until a month ago weren't given a shot at taking control of the Senate, they could do it now based on at least some polls, but there aren't many polls. Yeah. What do we make of all this?
Well, let's take a look at the numbers what we have going in, of course, is 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. If there's a tie at 50 each, the vice president would break the tie. So if, in fact, the Democrats win and Joe Biden presumably is elected, that would give them the tiebreaker, or it would stay with the Republicans as it currently is. And people have been sort of looking at different states and gaming them out. And so on the assumption that Alabama, which is currently in the Democratic hands, and on the assumption that does not hold for the Democrats, which is probably a fairly good assumption, that the Democrats then may need to pick up an additional seat, and they may need to get, in fact, 4 to get to 50. And then Biden would win and break the tie. So there's a lot of ifs in there. The only thing that I think has changed is that people now see a pathway that might be able to happen because, as you say, Jay, people vote along party lines. And if a presidential candidate carries the state, well, in 2016, every single state was in line for the first time. The states that Trump carried, the Republican senator carried, and the states that Hillary Clinton carried, the Democratic Senate candidate carried. So there was a perfect one-to-one correspondence. That's unusual, but it's been going in that direction, clearly.
Lee, when you said, let's look at the numbers, I expected poll numbers, but there's been such a dearth of polling in the states and specifically on a lot of the Senate races that you had to actually go to the actual makeup of the U.S. Senate itself. And I think that is interesting, the fact that we don't have a lot of data at this point measuring these candidates in these states, but the point really is well taken that the Senate candidates really seem to be tracking with the presidential candidates as well. This polarization and partisanship, we've become very familiar with. And I think there's a real expectation, particularly when we look at national numbers and see the deepening of that polarization. Democrats, 90-odd% for Biden, and Republicans 90-odd% for the president, that the expectation is this is again going to go down to the wire with just a few voters on the table.
So there's 4 states that in particular people are looking at beyond Alabama, and Alabama is a state that people are looking at to flip from Democrat to Republican, but there are states that Republicans believe they have some risk of losing to Democrats. Arizona, Colorado, Maine, and North Carolina are the big 4. There are a couple others that people are talking about now. Iowa is another one people are starting to talk about. But let's look at those. And I do want to pick up on what Barb just said, because there's a lot of talk about these states. but there's not much polling. So we can talk all day long about what's happening in Arizona. The most recent poll was a month ago. The most recent poll before that was in mid-March. And that one in mid-March was the last good scientific poll. The one since then was an internet panel poll. And this is true in other states as well. You look at Maine, where Susan Collins, a long-serving Republican senator, is perceived to be at risk. But how do we know that? Well, there's a poll. The most recent poll was early March, and it was a Democratic-leaning polling organization that does internet panel polls, which aren't scientific. So,
okay, but Jay,
I'm not sure we can draw a lot of conclusions from the public polling about how in the mix any of these are.
Yeah, and I think that distinction you made is like really interesting, because clearly a lot of people are talking about the closeness of these races, and my guess is those pundits are relying on campaign polls, which we're not obviously getting to see, to kind of like draw conclusions that in fact these are the 4 states. And you skipped over Montana, where Steve Bullock is now running, and that.
Well, yeah, there are others. There's Montana. There's Iowa. There are others. Yeah. I just mentioned 4. I'm trying to limit it a little bit.
And Michigan, I think too.
I'm sorry. What did you say, Barb?
And Michigan.
Yeah, well,
Michigan's one where Republicans think they might have a shot. There has been some fairly good public polling there over the last month, and that seems right now pretty out of reach for Republicans.
Yeah, and especially if Joe Biden were to carry it. Now, some of these numbers are the expectations are being influenced by the fact that Biden is thought to be ahead or close in a lot of these states. That may or may not be the case tomorrow, or certainly in November. But Mark Kelly, a strong candidate in Arizona for the Democrats, John Hickenlooper in Colorado, Susan Collins.
Arizona. Remember, McSally lost the last time she ran.
That's right.
I mean, she is senator because she was appointed to John McCain's seat.
That's right.
So, and Mark Kelly being, very popular in that state as well.
And then John Hickenlooper seems to have an advantage over Senate incumbent Republican Cory Gardner.
Hickenlooper is one of our interviewers' favorite candidates.
Yes, once you know it, you never forget it. Susan Collins has been very controversial, obviously, with the Kavanaugh vote in the Supreme Court nomination process, and that's thought to be a very close race. And the race in North Carolina, I think, is interesting because the Democrat Cal Cunningham is likely to do better in some rural areas there than Democrats typically do. So there's actually 2 of these states where the Democrat might run slightly ahead of the national ticket, and that would be Arizona and North Carolina.
But again, keep in mind what you said is true. If anybody's talking about these races with any knowledge at all, it's because of internal polling. And
That's
internal polling may be accurate. I mean, they spent a lot of money on it. Much internal polling is actually very good, but it's not publicly released. So a lot of this is trying to read the tea leaves as opposed to having any real data. But the other piece of this is it's May. It's early May. And so I get, we hit on this over and over, but Barb, this is a snapshot in time. This is not November. And whatever the candidates are polling right now, that information is being used to guide campaign strategies to try and change these numbers one way or another.
Now, also the Republicans in the Senate have really stuck by the president through thick and thin.
Yeah.
What do you see? How do you see that as a strategy? I know that sometimes it's been successful, and other times it's really been death to a candidacy.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say that as we've been talking about with the party line voting that's going on, that makes sense. If we were talking about Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon in way back when, there were a lot of split ticket voting going on. Republicans won in landslides, like when Richard Nixon did way back in 1972 before Watergate, and yet the Senate was overwhelmingly Democratic. So you had people voting for the Republican presidential candidate and the Democrat for Senate. That's no longer the case.
I think the other answer to your question, though, Barb, is that the RNC in the leaked memo this past week, or maybe it was end of last week, is advising House candidates to not talk about Donald Trump with regard to coronavirus. There is a terrific amount of polling, public polling, good public polling, showing that Americans in general, not necessarily Republicans, but Americans in general, do not think that Donald Trump has done a great job on coronavirus. And that memo, underscores, I think, your question about how close do you run to Trump as a Republican. And the advice being given to at least some House candidates from the RNC is maybe on this issue, don't get so close.
I assume this is a story still in the making and one that we're going to be polling on ourselves in the near future. So we're going to ask Mary Griffith, now our executive producer, to join us, and Jay Silver, one of our favorite graduating seniors, a political science major, a journalism and music minor, and also one of Mary Griffith's newsfeed stars, and also one of the students who accompanied us to New Hampshire. So you've got quite a resume kicking. Let me first ask, if coronavirus did not happen, what would you be doing right now?
Wait, what day is it? I would actually be working for the Marist Poll right now.
Okay. What would you be doing in a month?
You are, actually.
Well,
yeah.
Although this time he's not getting paid.
What would you be doing in a month?
Yeah, in a month. So the plan, actually, funny enough, the other Jay in the podcast's alma mater, Northwestern University, I would be moving out there right now. I would be getting on a plane with all my equipment and everything to start my master's program in journalism.
Okay, so clearly that's not happening. Talk a little bit about what your plans are now.
So the classes are still happening. They're going to be online right now. Right now, I'm just trying to communicate with the job I had over last summer, trying to figure out if coronavirus allows me to work because of hour changes and essential workers, and also just trying to figure out what my course load is going to be like. I haven't been able to register. I haven't been able to really do much of anything.
Well, you're finishing up too, right here at Marist, and I know you guys had to leave campus in a hurry. What was that like?
So I'm in an a cappella group, Time Check, and the night before they made the official announcement, we were all preparing for a concert, which we were going to have that weekend or the following weekend, because that was the week before spring break. The day after, we were heading off to we were out recording an album, and I get a buzz on my phone. I'm in the student government, so the student body president texted me. It's like, check your email. We read the email. Obviously, we knew that it was going to be an extended spring break. Nobody exactly knew what was going to happen. And then we kind of pieced things together, and we're like, we're not coming back.
Yeah, Mary, I mentioned the news feed, and that's obviously a big part of what Jay's been doing with the Marist Poll. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Lee, because as our students know, as Jay knows, as Jay participated in at the end of every academic year, we have a celebration of our students, and particularly those who are graduating. Daniela Charter, who heads up our phone room, puts that together each year. And Jay, you were voted most politically in tune. And, your role at the newsfeed has really been a great deal to research for us, to keep us abreast of a lot of the topics in the news, and to help guide and help inform projects like the podcast here. And so, transitioning from the topic of the newsfeed to your future plans, politics and journalism, those are your things. And I just had a question for you in terms of where you go from here as a journalist, as getting your master's degree. Has it changed? Has this COVID experience changed your lens in terms of how you view the craft of journalism, or how you plan on approaching your postgraduate path?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because that was literally the topic of conversation last week when I got the phone call from Northwestern alerting me that we are going to be online. We had a Zoom call with the associate dean. I attended, as well as some of the members of my particular concentration, which is political journalism. And we really thought about it in the sense that while life stops, a few of the careers that don't stop are those obviously in the medical profession, those in the food industry who may have to work, and then you have the journalists who have to basically switch their gears. They have to go from working in a closed environment to operating from home. You saw people like Chris Cuomo, who contracted the virus, have to do his entire shoot from his house. So journalism doesn't stop. It really doesn't. So it's going to be an interesting tactic in the future to figure out how to adapt.
I graduated from that program into one of the big recessions. I'll say how long ago it was. This will give away my age. It was 1986, 87. And there were 13 people in my concentration, which was broadcast. And I was the last of the 13 to get a job.
However,
which
Jay,
took about 3 months.
You were the first in the class, though.
I was. Well, there was an award that I got that was like first in class. But I was the last to get a job. But all of us, and I mentioned this just to give you some, I think, sense of what your class may be like. One of our professors in the broadcast side had been a news director, had been a producer at CBS News. I mean, been all over. And he said of the classes he taught there, a year later, we were the first group that every one of us was working in the profession in the way that we wanted to. And he thought a lot of that had to do with the adversity that we would be facing and how much harder we worked to make sure that we could and would succeed in that. So I think that as trying a situation as may be, and as challenging as it may be, and as scary as it may be for you guys, this could end up being a very good thing for you career-wise in terms of steeling you for changes and preparing you for a world, especially a world in journalism, that is turning upside down as we speak, between newspapers and magazines losing all their revenue to online digital advertising falling and all that. Yet the New York Times has they have more digital subscribers than they ever had newspaper subscribers, or almost as many this month. So things are moving all over journalism. And I think this in a weird way is preparing you to deal with that.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct in this. We were talking about it. Perhaps the biggest thing that's still coming up is that we still have an election. And while we are kind of forced to take the election is forced to take a little bit of a backseat to the coronavirus, once September rolls around, you have the fact that there's an election coming up, and you'll have states like Michigan, you'll have states like Iowa and New Hampshire that are still crucial to the ballot boxes, and you're going to have to send us out there. That's what I'm prepared for.
Jay, you prompted me to do something that I never or rarely do, and that was to actually request to be part of this segment. I don't usually do that, and the reason is because I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm. I love your engagement politically and otherwise. You've always been such a positive force in our newsfeed team and in our classes. And so for the students who are coming into college, into Marist specifically, what advice would you give to them as they find their own path and they find their own niche and they find their own passion?
So it took me a very long time to actually kind of find what you were saying. It took me till sophomore year of college to kind of figure out everything. And the one thing I would always recommend is just keep to who you are, as well as make sure that nobody is stopping you from being yourself. You can find your environment wherever, whether it's the Marist Poll, in my case, also the music department, but to some people, maybe a sports team or fraternity or sorority. If someone's going to come in and tell you, hey, coronavirus happened, you're not going to be able to go perform in front of hundreds of people, I'm sorry. That still doesn't mean you can't stop doing music. Or if we're polling, if you're in the polling institute, hey, we may not have as many votes as we'd like, but there's still an election. We want you to help us poll for this. Nobody should really be stealing the thunder from it. And just be yourself. And know that everything will eventually improve. It may be in gradual amounts, but there will be change happening, I hope.
And this is why it's been a privilege to work with you, to teach you, to mentor you. I think I speak for everyone on the Poll Hub team and the Newsfeed team when we congratulate you on your graduation. This is not goodbye. If you don't come back and visit us, there will be a problem.
Oh boy.
And, and we wish you all the best of luck as you move forward into the next phase of your career and your life, Jay.
Thank you so much. And again, it's checking off a bucket list item being on Poll Hub.
Oh, thank you. And we certainly concur with Mary's wishes. Good luck. Good luck, Jay. And you guys got this. You guys definitely have this. So the team also wanted to take a look at some of our fan mail, and we did have one person who
fan mail.
Yeah,
that's generous.
Yeah, it is. It's fan mail, and we thought this was a pretty thought this was a pretty interesting kind of topic. Something we get an awful lot of, so we figured we would address. Someone tweeted, and let me just see. Actually, it's. Marianne Burns tweeted that you polled 1,859 people. I'm not sure that that's exactly accurate. I think we only polled 1,008, but on Twitter, and especially if she tweeted from an iPhone or a smartphone, I can identify with getting the number wrong. But that's besides the point. That is not most Americans, because obviously we do talk about if there is a proportion of a large proportion of people who give a particular answer, we do describe it as most. And I believe in that poll we had quite a number of Americans, 80%, saying that they did not want to open up the country in a number of different areas, particularly in restaurants and sporting events and whatnot. And she said, your article is extremely misleading and irresponsible as you keep saying Americans, not 1,859 Americans polled. There are over 300 million here. Irresponsible journalism continues. You guys want to weigh in on how 1,859, although it was only 1,008 Americans, are actually representative of Americans as a whole?
Well, I'll
soup, Lee. Soup.
So if your grandmother's cooking some soup and she puts a gallon in front, makes it, and she says, taste the soup.
No, it's a big pot, Lee.
No,
Grandma uses a big pot.
I know, I'm not to the big pot yet. So that's, a gallon or so in a couple quarts, and you stir it up and you take a drink and you know what the soup tastes like. Now, if you have 100-gallon container for some massive foodathon, soupathon, you stir it up.
A family barbecue.
A barbecue. and you like a lot of soup in your family, and you stir it up and you say, taste the soup. It's still the same flavor. By analogy, you can, if you have a good cross-section of the public, a representative cross-section, you can talk about what the larger group thinks or feels on a topic without interviewing everybody. So in theory, yes, this is a poll of Americans, not the number of Americans we happen to poll within a certain range, which we call the error margin. I'll give you one other quick example. You go to the doctor and you need to have your blood tested, okay? They take a little bit, a sample. From that, they generalize to what your whole blood system looks like, what your the platelets and the red and white, etc. Don't
go there, Lee.
That's as far as I'm going.
Right.
Stick with
polling. Stick with polling.
Stick with polling. Okay. Nonetheless, sampling is a big part of our lives, and that's what we're doing. It's nothing more glorious or less glorious than that. Although a lot of people say, how can you do this? And the proof is in. The stuff's pretty accurate at the end. And yeah, marvel at the fact that we can talk about 1,000 people and know what the entire country might think on a topic.
And you don't.
It might not make.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it might not make intuitive sense, but it does.
And you don't have to really eat the whole pot of soup in order to...
Or drain your entire body of blood.
to find out,
okay.
To find out what's in it.
That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Blood and soup and all. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, although we're all remote, so we're actually none of us are at Marist College, literally. Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our editor.
We want to thank Roper Center and the Archives at Cornell for providing us the ability to look back in time at survey results and questions over the years. And they have lots of good stuff right now, so you might want to check it out on different times, viruses and the like.
Well, if you do have any questions or comments, we, as you can tell, love to answer them. So please reach out to us on social media. Be a little careful on the numbers because we do notice those. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. And actually, we've talked a lot about the Marist Poll Academy, our online learning platform. And you can actually see on there an animation of Lee making his bowl and pot of soup and actually kind of ladling it out to folks. So that could be a very special treat. But
so Marianne Burns, get to Academy and learn something about Poland. We got it all right there.
See you next time.
Right? No. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying she should be looking at the Academy.
Absolutely.
Before we go, Jay Silver mentioned that he didn't decide until sophomore year what he wanted to do. His parents are very fortunate. I called mine 2 weeks before graduation to tell them I thought I wanted to go to grad school for journalism. So Jay Silver should thank his parents for being very kind to let him decide in sophomore year, because he could have tortured them like I tortured them.
And some of us haven't figured that out even yet.
when we grow up. Jay Silver, good luck to you. Appreciate your help.